Beginning a new journey can be stressful. That's why it's important to prepare the best you can. You never know what types of obstacles you may face as you venture out along these new paths. No matter what the journey, it's important to be proactive. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of your loved one. Order your copy today at www.jessicalazellcannon.com.
Hello, and welcome to the Proactive Caregiving Podcast. As a CPA with over 20 years as an industry accountant, Jessica stepped away from the corporate world to become a full-time caregiver for her mother. Having learned invaluable lessons along the way, she is now here to share those with you and to invite you to join her on this caregiver's journey. Here is your host, Jessica Cannon.
Hello, everybody. I am a proactive caregiver, and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver. If you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved ones. So today I wanted to talk to you because I wanted caregivers to understand the link between diabetes and dementia. Because let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, caregivers have joined the ranks of first responders who are also overworked and underappreciated. Regardless of whom they care for, the area of knowledge is still leaps and bounds away from filling in these gaps that we're experiencing. We may not be chosen doctors, nurses, attorneys, or therapists, but we need the resources, the connections, and the knowledge. We need it all shared so that we can continue as caregivers to adapt to this unknown, scary world for our loved ones. I love this motto that my next guest shares and works by, a motto that Dr. Jackie Gray uses. She says, better knowledge, better care, better outcomes. And that describes millions of caregivers, what we face as adult caregivers, because if we have better knowledge, if we have better abilities to care with that knowledge, then we're going to see better outcomes. But we have caregivers that are coming from all different backgrounds that need all sorts of information. Jackie is in the UK. She is a medical doctor. She's duly accredited as a specialist in primary care and public health. She is also the founder of the carentsroom.com, which is an online platform supporting adults looking after parents. Dr. Jackie has over 30 years of frontline specialist clinical experience in the English National Health Services. She's worked as a general practitioner, a consultant in public health medicine, and a clinical lecturer in epidemiology and public health. Jackie now works independently as a director of an expert public health consultancy, which helps organizations plan and improve health and care services. During 2020, compelled by a combination of personal and professional insights, Jackie decided to apply her expertise to fill the gaps in support for adults caring for their parents, a community she calls #Carents. She created the Carents Room to highlight the value of Carents and give them the information, advice, and even connections towards the information they need to keep themselves and their loved ones safe and well. Jackie lives with her husband and her 2 Springer Spaniels in Northeast England in the shadows of Hadrian's Wall. I invited Jackie to help because there is a connection between diabetes and dementia that the world overlooks. Thanks for coming on with me today, Jackie. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, Jessica.
So this is something that is another area of my journey because it was an area we also overlooked with my mother. years before we actually started to notice signs of dementia, there were the warnings for diabetes. And we kind of always balanced on this, dancing over the line of pre-diabetic and eventually being on diabetes medication. But there was so much information that we didn't know. We were always in the reactive state, and it reduced it down to, oh, we just need to eat less sweets, less sugar. I feel like that's where many of us are in the world right now. And had it not been for COVID and the bits of information that we were given that COVID affected people who were obese or had diabetes, it kind of raised a red flag, but then it almost kind of dismissed why that is the possibility. So with that in mind, and the motto that you live by and work by, that better care, better outcomes, can you give us some information of why it seems to be diabetes seems to be overlooked in this case, in that way?
I think in the UK it might be quite different, and certainly from a medical perspective, diabetes is often at the forefront of what we're trying to do for people, I guess, in the midlife onwards. It's not something that you would look at in a younger patient, but we have in the NHS, we have something called a national health check, which is open to people over 40, and it specifically looks for diabetes. We're conscious that diabetes is becoming increasingly more common, that it's a national problem. It's causing huge amounts of ill health. It's predisposing to all sorts of other conditions down the line. It accelerates aging. It's a huge problem. And so I think a lot is done to raise awareness of it. It's perhaps that people are not necessarily hearing those messages. And I talk about better knowledge, as you've said. I think there's a lot of information out there, but I think the problem is that there isn't a translation of that information into knowledge. So for me, information is lots of interesting facts. It's the fact that you could have diabetes. It's the fact that diabetes is a bit of a problem for all sorts of things. But for that to be turned into knowledge at an individual level, it has to be made very accessible to them in terms of their own background, in terms of their own needs, and in terms of their own relevance. And I don't think that as a doctor, I might go looking for diabetes, but I don't think as individuals, we're going to go looking for it necessarily. Right. And if you don't have access to a screening program, there's no reason why you would necessarily find it.
Right, right. And that's one of the drawbacks is it wasn't until we have the problems that diabetes brings about that we start looking for the screenings and we start looking for solutions, which is sad because then we stay in that reactive state. And so when we look in the areas of how we age and what seems to be aging us faster, I found it interesting that diabetes is one of those areas that happens to age us even faster. Can you shed some light on the simple aging versus the geriatric kind of syndromes as in relation to the diabetes?
So diabetes, so we're talking about type 2 diabetes here, right, rather than type 1. Type 2 diabetes, which is the common form, and becomes more common as we get older. It has multiple impacts on multiple organs. So one of its greatest impacts is on the blood vessels in the body. It affects the big vessels and it affects the small vessels. So in effect, it affects the circulation. And then the circulation is fundamental to the health of eyes, kidneys, brain, heart. And so once you've begun to affect the blood vessels, you then begin to affect all those organs, which are so vital, as we grow older. And so there is a direct link between diabetes and cardiovascular disease, with diabetes and kidney disease, eye disease, and even circulatory problems in the periphery. And recently, there's a lot of medical and scientific interest in links with diabetes in the brain as well.
So that is where I recently thought, how interesting is this, that there's another area that we don't know of it. It gets named, and in our world, or on my side of this country, they have this name. There's a walk for a cure, because we don't really know. We just know we need to raise funds to, quote unquote, fix something that we don't truly understand. And so that's one of the things that in this medical community, the type 3 diabetes was called mainly to connect the link between diabetes and Alzheimer's. And I know that not all doctors agree with this, and the medical community is still kind of hashing the details out, because in order to have type 3, basically, you must already have type 2. It's not something that we just catch a cold or catch some type 2 diabetes or catch diabetes altogether. I mean, this happens over a period of time. And so that's one of the things that I want the listeners to understand is you may not understand how your blood sugar affects your organs and systems, but how diabetes can actually affect the brain. Can you give me a little bit of information about how it does that?
I'll do my best. It is quite complicated. So type 3 diabetes isn't a widely accepted term, and it's not a widely accepted diagnosis, although it is a very interesting one, and it's caused a lot of scientific interest and spurred a lot of research. So my understanding is that type 3 diabetes is something that was postulated, put forward by medical specialists in America, which is why it might be a bit more highlighted there than perhaps in the UK. But certainly the interest was because it was shown that there is a link between diabetes and dementia, and also with Alzheimer's dementia. So people with diabetes have a higher risk of developing dementia, and there seems to be a higher risk or an association with Alzheimer's too. And obviously, when we see associations, that you want to know, is there a cause there, a common cause, common factor, what's going on? One of the challenges, I think, of unpicking what's going on is what I said earlier on, is that we know that type 2 diabetes has so many effects on organs in the body, often to do with the circulation. So it's sometimes hard to unpick what else is going on in the brain and in those people that develop dementia. Some people with diabetes do go on to have a degree of cognitive decline that may then be diagnosed or misdiagnosed as dementia. To be diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's, whatever people call it across the world, you would then need to do some imaging as well. So it's not always in every study that we're looking at the same type of dementia when we see these associations. So that's a bit complicated too. When people come up with a theory or a new diagnosis, it's never taken up immediately. Some of the data shows that really, if we come up with some new scientific knowledge about a disease or a practice, it can take maybe 17 years to actually become mainstream. So this type 3 diabetes theory, the link between diabetes, type 2 and Alzheimer's, that's a very new thing. It's a new thing for medicine. And it's an exciting thing because it's caused all sorts of scientific studies. We're looking at rats, the brains in rats. We're looking at populations, what happens to people over time. And there are even studies that look at brains post-mortem. And they're looking to see levels of blood sugar in the brain and levels of insulin, and also then experimenting to see what the effect of these has on brain cells. And there is a link with type 2 diabetes with more insulin circulating, because there is a resistance in the body. We might be getting more insulin circulating in the brain. And that insulin has multiple effects on the cells in the brain. It affects the way proteins are deposited and cleared. It affects the way there might be inflammation within the cells in the brain. And so there's a lot to unpick. There's a lot of pathways, a lot of chemical pathways. And it's also, when we look at over long periods of time, and people have been followed up for maybe 20, 30 years, it seems that factors quite early in that disease process have an impact down the line. So things like high blood pressure play a role, but that might be something that's happening 20 years before somebody even begins to show signs of dementia. So it's very, very complicated to unpick. But the good news is that they found this link, and it's an interesting link, and there's a body of knowledge now really beginning to unpick and try and find out what's going on and whether we can find a treatment as a consequence, which is exciting.
It's very exciting, and I'm so glad that we are actually finally at this stage and it's being looked at in this way, because when we talk about better health choices, a lot of people make that connection of, oh, I must eat salads, I must eat this or that. And it really comes down to sometimes the simple things that if we can change some of our healthy eating habits or create healthy eating habits, maybe the 10, 15, 20 years that this takes place over and the damage that's done can either be reversed or prevented altogether. And so that healthy life expectancy versus the disability-free life expectancy kind of comes about because of these studies. So is it more of a trend to age well in this case, or age-proof our homes, our bodies, our heart, our skin, all of that, to live, I guess, I don't want to say disability-free or diabetes-free, but it seems like it's becoming more of the trend versus an understanding of what they're preventing. Do you happen to agree with any of that?
So in the UK, our national public health body are conscious that we're living longer. So we have a longer life expectancy. Nice. But we're also conscious that we don't actually have a very much extended disability-free life expectancy or healthy life expectancy. So average life expectancy in England for a man is about 79 years. But from, you can expect to perhaps live a healthy life or a disability-free life only up to 63 years. So for that extended life that we have nowadays, the longevity, it's not always a healthy or independent life. And there's been a big trend to actually say, well, what can we do? What can we actually do to extend life to those years? So have a better quality of life in those years. And very much it's about what you can do perhaps early on in life, but it's not too late in middle life. Middle life is a very important time to actually adopt a healthier lifestyle. And it is showing that by doing that, you can reduce your risk. If you're more physically active, you can reduce your risk for diabetes by maybe 30, 40%. These are quite staggering risk reductions, but it does take work and it does take belief that the work will pay off. But the risk factors for diabetes, the risk factors for dementia, the risk factors for other diseases of aging or problems as we age are very, very similar. And the health messages are very consistent. It is about healthy eating, but it doesn't have to be about salads.
Right.
It is about doing more exercise and being less sedentary. Mm-hmm. It's about drinking less. It's about carrying less weight. And it's about being both socially active and mentally active too. So there's a lot of changes required, but a lot of them are if you're physically active, you might want to eat better anyway, because it's not very pleasant being overweight and dehydrated, and exercising at the same time. So adopting a healthy lifestyle makes life much better in the short term, right? But it's an investment for the long term too. It really does pay off, and there is a strong body of evidence which consistently across countries, across the globe, across population groups, we're getting the same results, the same benefits. It's just, it's hard because it requires a personal investment in how you use your time.
Exactly. And that's the sad part of it, is that the evidence is there and the risk factor is proof that you can actually have a better quality of life. You have to choose that better quality of life, unfortunately. And especially when we look at the staggering stats of type 2 diabetes, that 60% of are more likely to have Alzheimer's or vascular dementia. Women are more likely to develop vascular dementia than men, just because of the way we live and our choices of life. And it not necessarily may be a food choice or exercise choice. Sometimes the level of stress and how we balance that in life is a little different.
Absolutely. I mean, stress, we know that plays a part too. The science around that is less well developed. But that does seem to have an impact on aging and the aging process, big life events. And so there's a lot more work to be done to unpick how that affects, or perhaps how it accelerates some of the other factors or magnifies some of the factors. We don't know those interactions, but we are aware that stress plays a part. And of course, other aspects of stress and mental health, like being socially isolated, being lonely. And these are all factors that come into play. And increasingly, we're recognizing that loneliness might be as an important, risk factor, just like, say, high blood pressure. But again, there's more work that we need to do to turn that sort of level of, this looks interesting. There's a lot of evidence, what, specifically, how much does it play a part, and in who and when? These are the questions that we still don't fully understand.
Right. I think the mental health area of that, the loneliness and the stress, and not understanding how to deal with that and cope with things, I believe it contributes very heavily to the mental health part of that. And that was something that, I wouldn't recognize until I started caring for my mother and seeing how she was living and the level of depression even, and how that depression was connecting towards what she was choosing to eat or not eat, or what she was choosing to, how much exercise she was getting or not getting, or, even just stepping outside for fresh air. It made leaps and bounds of difference between what she was willing to do for her life versus what she knew she needed to do and just had no passion for it. And so making those changes for my own life, I realized that I was having to balance my goals towards what was going to help me feel better, just overall better energy, better moods, less swings of those moods. And it wasn't a one thing. It wasn't a quick fix on anything. It was choosing an overall approach that would help in general, because I had for many years dealt with hypoglycemia, and that was something I didn't understand. I just knew I had to pack a lot of snacks, and every time I felt lightheaded or a little bit dizzy or possibly nauseous, I had to eat something. And I learned to manage that. And then I also learned, as far as managing that, how far I could go with it before I would be at a point of mood swings or just pulling away from life in general, wanting to crawl in the bed and get under the covers and just avoid the world. So that choice and understanding what's happening to our bodies and why, and then still trying to make the choice to avoid it, unfortunately, it's the harder direction to go in, because it takes a day by day consistency of us choosing the happier, healthier ways to go and creating that trend for ourselves. So we have our chronological age, and then we have our mental age. So how can caregivers and Carents in this area intentionally focus on promoting the inclusion of that kind of equality, while as we help our loved ones with whatever ailment it may be as they're aging, How do we help them, include them in our lifestyles if we finally, for example, make that choice for that healthier lifestyle? How can we work towards including them in that lifestyle with us?
So obviously it depends on the family relationships or the caring relationships and the level of disability or cognitive decline of the person that you're caring for. I think one of the key things is attitude. It is about having an ambition and aspiration for the person you're caring for, and recognizing that there are things that you can do to maintain engagement, and recognizing the dangers of excluding. And they're not just personal ones, they are social ones. We're living in a very fast changing society, a society that's becoming very digitalized, very exclusive, and quite young in many ways. So as people are aging, it's very easy to become disconnected from that. So I think families and carers do have a significant role to play. One of the things that's important to highlight, I think, is checking for sensory loss. So I'm talking mainly hearing loss, but possibly visual loss as well. Because we know that's linked with aging, particularly hearing loss. But as we get older, we're less well able to hear. And hearing loss is particularly excluding. People become very easily and very quickly disadvantaged if they can't hear, if they can't communicate. And it does accelerate any cognitive decline. In the UK, there are studies going on now to look at hearing aids in people with hearing loss to see whether that can actually prevent or slow or improve outcomes in dementia. So that there is something about being aware of disabilities and tackling those. There's something about not being too caring, and that sounds quite cruel, but if you do everything for someone, then they will lose the ability to do it for themselves. So yes, they will switch off. Yes. And so focusing on what they can do, what they're able to do, and really harnessing that can be really valuable. And so, you know, in a simple family, it might be if you're starting to eat healthy, and you're creating your own rather than instant processed foods. If you can, you know, share that food. If you're making a casserole, for example, and sharing that casserole with the person you're caring, then you're actually guaranteeing that they're getting a nutritional boost that perhaps they wouldn't get otherwise if they were to pick up food or try and make it themselves, because often there's a lot of shopping entailed with fresh food, and home cooking can be time consuming too. So there's things about that. I think there's also a lot around being socially engaged. So even if somebody's very cognitively impaired, eating together around a table is actually something that's really very special. It's so easy to put somebody who's disabled in some way to one side to serve them and then get on with your own life. But including them in meals, including them in activities, they may not want to go for a jog, obviously, or perhaps not obviously, but they may want to come and watch you. They might want to sit on the side of the swimming pool and actually be part of that community of people who watch and supervise. They might want to attend a young child's sports day, and just getting out of the car and walking and staying on foot. But you know, just integrating them in life can be so beneficial, and it's hard because it takes time. It slows the process down, doesn't it? When we're all living such busy lives, tackling work, tackling family responsibilities, personal responsibilities, partners, friends, and then to have to slow down to accommodate the needs of somebody who can't move at the same pace, right? That can be challenging, but it can also be immensely beneficial to that person that you're caring for too. So it's a balance, and it's very hard to come up with a one fit, you know, solution other than some of those sensory issues that I've come up with. And I suppose then I've spoken there very much as from the personal perspective as a caregiver, but I think there's also an opportunity of saying, actually, if I do it all, then that actually disadvantages the person I'm caring for, perhaps opening up other caregivers, caregiving opportunities, other therapists, other community groups, friends, family, widens the social environment for an individual. So although we might want to do it all, and sometimes it's easier than delegating, it's not always in the best interest of the person that you're looking after.
I'm glad
I don't
you
know what
said
you think
that.
about that.
No, I'm glad you said that, because that was a lesson I had to learn early on. Because, like you said, it's really a challenge to slow down enough to be able to step in and help and be patient to be able to help. Because when I was balancing work and life, family, their schedules, my schedule, I always wanted to be able to step in and do things quickly. I knew what needed to be done. I tried to organize the day between laundry and meals and changing bed sheets and showering and other hygiene areas for my mother. I wanted to step in, and I had my mental checklist. Okay, we need to this, because I have to go, and because I have these other things, I've got this, and this to do afterwards. And then I realized after a period of time, she felt very comfortable with me doing certain things. Of course, showering was always a difficult task, but she eventually got to the point where the more I did for her, the less she did for herself. And the less she did for herself, the more she seemed to feel, I guess, the depression was more obvious to me. At first it was hidden, but eventually it became more obvious, because she was starting to feel like she was incapable of doing anything for herself. And when she would make it known, I realized, okay, I'm sorry. I stepped in and I took charge. I stepped in to do everything for you because I felt like you needed it to be done for you. And I had to admit, I stepped in to do everything for you because I knew I could do it faster and get back to my schedule, get back to my life if I did it for you. And so that was a really hard lesson to learn. And then it was a little bit of a challenge at first to find that happy balance. Okay, what is it that you can do and that you want to do? And I can just stand by and be of assistance as needed. Or what is it that you really don't want to do at all, and you're just avoiding it because there's a physical, possibly walking and movement would sometimes make her lightheaded. And circling back to meals and what she had eaten, what she hadn't eaten, and all of the details, and paying attention to all the little intricacies of her day, so that I could figure out, okay, when do I rush in and when do I step back? When do I assist and when do I watch? And it is a challenge. It is a difficult challenge. So I'm glad you said it that way, because that's something that I think a lot of caregivers struggle, and a lot of the stress comes up because it becomes a balance, a struggle to balance that work life or care life kind of world. And we find the corners that we can cut, and other times we have to feel comfortable. I had to feel comfortable and be able to sit in the wait and sit in the silence and just kind of let things be and evolve. And it wasn't always easy. So it eventually got to be a little bit easier. And even after we reached a point of our new routine and I knew what she could and couldn't do, there was always the next level that we declined to. And so we had to rediscover what was possible, what she could do, what she didn't want to do. And it just started again. And we would go for a little while longer, and then there was another decline. And so we had to rediscover, and I had to fight that urge to step in and, well, let me just do it for you, because that's the easy way to do this, but it's not always the best way.
No, unfortunately.
So, as I mentioned earlier, you have this wonderful website called the Carents Room, and you're helping people get into connection with resources and helpful neighbors in a sense. So how do you intend to create this easy access for carers and carents to connect with experts through the Carents Room?
So when I set up the Carents Room, I was conscious that a lot of information exists, a lot of knowledge exists, But it's often in lots of different places, and it's very time consuming to find it. And just because I knew it existed wouldn't naturally be available or accessible for someone else. I wanted to try and bring all the information together in one place and without replicating. So if you've got an expert in dementia, you don't want me to try and duplicate or replicate that. You want to know about that expert. You want to go straight to them. So I was very much about giving you an introduction, but maybe signposting. So there's a lot of signposting on there to try and save you time, but trying to direct you to trusted sources, professional sources, the experts, so that you're not misled. Again, it's about being able to trust and believe that that's going to be something that you could actually perhaps take to a health professional and say, well, I've read this and this is the current state of play. Can you help me achieve A, B, and C for the person I'm caring for? So rather than perhaps some superficial information written by copywriters, which I was finding that a lot of the information was very thin on the ground, and there's a lot of words but not a lot of facts in there, or a lot of facts but not a lot of practical information. So I've been trying to signpost and coordinate. I think there's still something I need to do about connecting carers themselves, carers and carents. I've looked at the idea of a discussion forum, a discussion board, and it's something I do want to do, but I want to be able to do it in a way that protects the people that they're caring for. So there are discussion groups, I've seen them on Facebook, but there is something about respecting the people that we're caring for, so not being overly sharing about the individual. But if I tell you some personal facts about me now, then I'm doing that in the full knowledge, and that's my right to do so. But if I was to share some facts about other members of my family, for example, or people I care for, then, and I hadn't asked their permission, I don't feel that that's necessarily in their interests all the time, and we would have to have that discussion. And so I want a discussion forum that is ethical and respectful and promotes equality and equality of opportunity for everyone involved. So I'm not rushing in. I'm taking it slowly. I do think that there are opportunities to link further on video on YouTube, to podcasts like your own, and others, to perhaps conference proceedings. The carentsroom.com is a work in progress, basically. I'm building information as I go. I'm on social media too, and I'm listening on social media, although it's a very visual thing, but I'm trying to understand what the gaps are, what people really need, what their priorities are, and what the themes are, the needs are, and trying to respond to that and fill it in a way that reflects them rather than what I think they should want. But I think there is something about both, because what people want isn't always what they need. It goes back to what we were talking about, healthy lives. They actually need a healthy life if they want to live a good life and a healthy life in future, and not have their own families depending on them, looking after them in a state of dependency as much as possible. So, but it's not what we want. We want to have a nice, comfortable existence sometimes, and the wants and the needs are sometimes different. So I'm trying to meet both, but really promote the health of older people and the health of the people that care for them too. So there are two goals there. I'm also trying to link with innovators, because I think that we talked a bit about helping people and doing too much for them. I think with services and products, we could promote more autonomy for people who are living with disabilities or cognitive decline. And unfortunately, those products and services are poorly developed, particularly in the UK, where we've got a very much state-centred provision. But I do think that there are opportunities to develop that, and it's something that I think the Carents Room could do.
Absolutely. You have the potential to help so many people through your website and bringing this information to them. because this information and the forums, I mean, the support that is available for other carers and other Carents, that's something that I personally sought out for myself, because as like you said, finding the information, there's a lot of information and some of it didn't make much sense to me, because I didn't have a real life moment to relate it to. And so it wasn't until I reached that real life moment that, oh, I remember this information I found 6 months ago or 2 years ago, even. Oh, that's what they were talking about. But in the time, it didn't help. What really helped was connecting with others and being able to talk with them. And even if we didn't have exactly the same scenario going, same situation for our loved ones, we still had a lot of similar feelings, a lot of approaches to things that we were able to offer each other information and support. So it makes such an incredible difference, especially in this world of COVID, where we are isolated a little bit more than we would like, more than we ever expected to be. But being able to still find others and connect with others in a way that we can learn from each other is fabulous. And so I appreciate that you took the time to put this together to help, because I do find some people online that are in that direction and trying to help. And the cool thing about it, the amazing thing about it, is that we each come from a different background, and being able to connect with others and bring this information, if we connect with each other in the first place and bring this information together, then we're just helping humanity overall. And that's what needs to be done sooner than later at this point. So, and I want to also recognize that the Carents Room received multiple accolades, and recently you received a certification for the Digital Women's Award ceremony in 2021. How did that feel to step forward in this direction and be recognized in such a way?
Oh, it was fantastic, because I'd set the Carents Room up in autumn 2020, and then the award ceremony was a year later, effectively. And we were runner-up in a couple of categories, finalised in 3, and our artist was a finalist too. So we had plenty of recognition there, and it felt very good. It felt that it was a worthwhile venture doing the Carents Room, but it also felt that we'd raised awareness of carers, that the needs and supports of those who are vulnerable. We were reaching a wider audience. So this wasn't an award from the health sphere, and it wasn't an award from social care or caring. It was an award from a digital women's group. And they're women from all different backgrounds and lifestyles and ages, and very few of them are likely to be carers, given the profile and the prevalence of caring. But they recognise that this is going on in rooms and neighbours and throughout their own communities. And I think it's raised awareness of the fact that this work goes on. It goes on behind closed doors. But it's important work, it's vital work. And as you say, it's vital work for humanity. And it's important for the wider community to recognise that work goes on. Because one day, the chances are that the majority of us will either need to be cared for or will become a carer for someone else. And until you've worked in that arena, I think many people don't realise that. But the award for the Carents Room, I think, raised awareness of that. It emphasised that, and it felt like it was a huge step forward, a leap forward for the community as a whole, not just the caring community, but female community, because I do think that caring is still very much a woman's task, and the statistics bear that out. Not exclusively, and I do want to recognise all the men that are doing such great work there. But I do think that we're beginning to see recognition, and that's fantastic. So it was great to know that the Carents Room was hitting the right note, shall we say, but also that we're actually changing society, and that's just huge. It's really, I can't even begin to put in words how great that felt.
Yes, especially when, as you mentioned earlier, that change when this comes about and even the studies that are done, it usually takes 17 years. So getting ahead of that, and at least, when does that 17 years actually start? And so
Yeah.
this is wonderful that we could say that it has already started now in this generation with all the efforts that you've put forward, because it is exactly, because that's what it is. When a lot of the people that I've reached out to, I do come across some gentlemen every now and again that are able to share, that are willing to share their emotional journey with their loved one, whether they were taking care of a spouse or their parent. And it is fascinating to hear their perspective. But majority of the time when I do reach out to other caregivers, it is a woman that is frantically balancing her life with parents, spouse, children, possibly even neighbors and friends, because that's just what we end up doing. But the more information we get out there, and the sooner we get it out there and connect and remove some of the barriers, that this is wonderful that you and I are able to speak today and realize that we are on different sides of the world, but connecting and bringing more people together through groups like the Carents Room.
And of course your own work too. So I admire what you're achieving, and you've been at it for longer than me, so I'm very keen to learn from you and your experience, Jessica. So
thank you.
Thank you for your appreciation, but I just want to express my appreciation to you too. And thank you for having me on.
I absolutely appreciate you taking the time out of your busy work schedule to be able to share this information. And so I would love to know where our listeners can find more information on the Carents Room.
So the Carents Room is a website. So www.thecarentsroom.com. And Carents is just like parents, but it's with a C, so because you're caring for your parents. So thecarentsroom.com. We're on social media, on Instagram at Carents Room, Facebook at Carents Room, and Twitter at Carents Room. So quite consistently. Just to be clear, when I talk about a room, I wanted, it was partially inspired by Virginia Woolf and a room of my own. It was conscious that women were, as you've said, juggling everything, and then trying to find the time to synthesize and access and understand and interpret all the information that they needed to do what is a very complicated job. And so I wanted them to have a room of their own, a place that they could go that would be quite calm, not overwhelmed with adverts and too much information, but very much tailored to their needs. So there's a virtual bookcase, and that's where you'll find all the guides. There's a neighbourhood, which is where you'll find a directory of links to other organisations, charities, in particular experts that are dealing with specific problems. And then I've got a coffee table, which is where you'll find blogs and bits of research and news, like the awards ceremony and things. But moving on, I want to have a chair which is all about you, so that you can actually think about your own health and care, because often carers do negate their own needs. And then also in there, an opportunity to chat to other people, perhaps on a sofa, a virtual sofa, and ultimately a store cupboard where you might be able to find suitable products and services that can help you and help the loved one that you care for too. So yeah, that's the direction. Plenty more furniture to sort out, but yeah, it takes time.
That's wonderful. I love the way you put it that way, because right away I was picturing having the virtual happy hour on the couch.
Sounds fantastic.
Yes, because that is something that, I think caregivers can relate to. We may not always be able to step away from our loved ones or balance in the schedules that we are balanced, but we may find that moment of time from our home and be able to virtually log in and connect with someone at that time and have a virtual happy hour, or maybe a conversation over a cup of coffee or something virtually.
Yeah, and I do think, yeah, you're right. And it is important to be able to relate to people who are going through a similar experience. and facing similar challenges. I'm using the word similar because I know every situation is different, but there are common themes and common challenges, and you can learn so much more from people who have been there and done it and are doing it and are in the thick of it, and give each other moral support too, because that's really important. We know that caring can be so isolating, so connecting on common themes is very, very important.
Absolutely. Because I know from personal experience, when I feel like I have no one that understands what I'm going through, it just makes the world of caregiving feel darker than it really is. And the moment I'm able to connect with someone and hear their story and understand either mine isn't as bad, or they get me, they understand what I'm feeling or what I'm coming from, then that world of caregiving brightens up that much more. So I get that.
Yeah, and it's something I've seen time and time again on Instagram. People use different words, but it's the same message. And they often say a lot of their existing friends, once they became a caregiver, and their friends who had not been through that experience didn't understand what they were going through, and that made the experience even more isolating. When you feel that you're in it alone and nobody can even listen and understand. So
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking your time with me today to share the information. I wanted caregivers to understand that even though so many studies are still being done trying to understand the brain with dementia in itself, there is an area that is being linked from diabetes to dementia. And so I appreciate you taking the time to share that information and letting us know that the Carents room is somewhere that other caregivers can go for even more information if they need to find something that they're not getting elsewhere.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jessica.
Definitely.
Really enjoyed talking to you.
Same here. We'll be talking again soon, I hope.
I hope so.
So thank you for joining in, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this episode gave you a little bit more food for thought. And until next time, be proactive. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. We really hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about proactive caregiving and to hear other episodes of this podcast, please visit www.jessicalazelcannon.com. This podcast is produced by Canon Light Media, LLC, www.canonlightmedia.com. Music provided by Chris Paradise.